coming up on Lawmakers. The Senate finds a way to fund coverage for medically needy children through the Katie Beckett waiver. A Senate confidentiality rule leads to a lawsuit. And the House passes a bill that would require local school systems to inform parents about student clubs. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Wandy Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, the Senate passes its version of the FY06 supplemental budget.
And the House votes to give NASCAR tax breaks if it brings the Hall of Fame to Georgia. But our lead story tonight, help for families with medically needy children. The Senate passed its version of the amended 2006 budget today. One of the more notable changes dealt with helping families who recently lost funding from the Katie Beckett Waiver, a program that helps families with disabled children. David Zelski now joins us live with more on this change. David.
Well, and Wandy, the Georgia Department of Community Health realized around spring of 2005 that several families who received the Katie Beckett Waiver did not meet the specified criteria to qualify. So ever since then, these families have lost their funding. Senator Regina Thomas took the well today to explain a way she believed funding could be restored.
By removing funds, which is only in bonds, just to change them as do not fund. And by adding line 80.11 on page 49 to read, add funds for the Katie Beckett waiver for families who don't meet the new criteria used starting October 2005.
Chairman Jack Hill then explained that federal funds may soon be reinstalled to the families who have lost their support.
There's some ongoing action in Congress that's something called the Family Act, or something that may well bring us some relief somewhere along the way. Whatever we do between now and maybe next January will be on our dime, will be on our money.
Eventually, Senator Seabaugh and Republican leadership found funds through bond interest to generate the $3.6 million needed to temporarily help these families, and the amendment gained bipartisan support.
We had prepaid bond interest for several reasons. We accumulated some bond interest prepaid in the back of the budget is where I call it. And so we took it from that source rather than from capital projects. You know, it's still $3.6 million in cash, and so that's a pretty good lick. But, you know, I just thought it was a good bipartisan effort.
Again, the compromise amendment passed the Senate with bipartisan support and now goes back to the House for their approval. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
And in addition to the $3.6 million for funding the Katie Beckett program, the Senate version of the 06 amended budget includes $2 million for materials for Georgia's public libraries, $5 million for job growth projects, including nanotechnology research at Georgia Tech and Emory, $500,000 to assist sheriff's departments with courthouse security plans. Another $500,000 would go to funding the Paul Coverdell Eminent Scholar Program at Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville, and money was added for 25 new cars for state troopers. Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill gives a synopsis of the Senate version of the supplemental budget.
The governor's revenue estimate adds about $445 million to the 06 basic budget, and this is a total state funds of some $17.8 billion. It's a very modest amended budget, and I think lays the groundwork for us, as if the present trends continue, to work towards building up our reserve fund at the end of June. It's presently about $256 million. As you remember, we spent our reserves during the recession, had about $770 million at the time. Hopefully, we will accumulate several hundred million to build that reserve back up. The statutory amount is 4%, which is some $800 million is our goal right now. 42.5% of the amended funds goes to education. The bulk of that is to K-12 education. 8% is to community health, which is all Medicaid additional funds. 11% to criminal justice. 13% to economic development. 13% to fiscal management. 7.5% to Department of Human Resources, and some 4.6% to the other categories, including DNR and agriculture. Georgia is now spending, based on this amended budget, in 06, we're now spending 53.9% of our state funds that we spend on education. This is 38.8% for K-12 education, 15.2% for higher education. So we continue to increase the amount of money that Georgia spends on education in this state.
The Senate passed its version of the supplemental budget by a vote of 52-1, setting the stage for a House-Senate Conference Committee to come up with a compromise mid-year spending plan.
The House today agreed to require school boards to provide parents with descriptions of the school clubs that their children may join. But House Bill 661 stops short of requiring students to get parental permission to participate in extracurricular activities. Those who oppose the measure argued that local school systems should decide whether to create such a policy and that parents can already monitor their children's participation. But supporters of HB 661 said that the measure would make parental involvement easier.
It's very easy with all the accessible clubs nowadays for children, young people, minors, and I want to emphasize that, minors, young people, to get overindulged in their school career. They can actually get involved in too many things. I just felt it was very important that the parents have more of a say-so and more input on their students' career, and that's really what this bill does. It basically says that the local school boards will use their discretion. They will show or tell the parents the school clubs, the background of the school clubs, and basically have a say whether that child can participate in that club.
I'm a parent. I have 2 children, and I know that my son plays football, runs track, is in the jazz band, is in the Spanish clubs, in the math club. If I chose for him not to participate in any of those clubs, wouldn't it be my responsibility to say to him, no, you cannot participate in any one of those clubs?
Yes, sir, it would.
So why would there need to be an additional law that would require the schools to get involved in a decision between a parent and a child?
Because, again, as I stated earlier, I think there's probably clubs in schools that the parents are not aware of, that the children may partake, may get themselves overextended, that the parents need to be involved with their children.
The same thing is true to go to a school nurse there in the public school. In order to receive a Tylenol for a headache, or an Advil, or some cough syrup, there must be on record a permission slip. It's not any great administrative nightmare. This doesn't cause a ton of paperwork to be processed through the school system. One slip of paper, one permission slip, one signature returned to a teacher that says you have my permission.
As adopted, House Bill 661 requires local school systems to provide information about extracurricular activities to parents. Each system would be responsible for designing a method for parents to notify schools if their children are not permitted to participate in certain activities. That measure passed 143 to 25. It now moves to the Senate. In other education news, the House also introduced Governor Sonny Perdue's Truth in Class Size Act. This bill would not allow kindergarten classes to exceed 20 students. Classes in grades 1 through 3 could accommodate up to 21 students, while grades 4 through 8 could have as many as 28. High school classes could have no more than 32 students. The bill would also create a maximum teacher-student ratio for math, science, social studies, and language arts classes. The mandates would not apply to special education classes as they have separate requirements. The bill will now be assigned to House Education Committee.
The ACLU has filed a lawsuit against the Senate Ethics Committee on behalf of Senator Vincent Ford and self-styled citizen watchdog George Anderson. The groups want to change a Senate rule about disclosure of ethics reports. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman joins us live with more on that story. Jesse.
Well, Gerald, the Senate Ethics Committee hears ethics complaints from senators and Capitol staffers. According to Senate rules, the counts of those complaints are kept secret until they are declared viable. The ACLU lawsuit seeks to change that rule. Senate Ethics Chairman Renee Unterman is named as a defendant in the lawsuit.
We're debating all kinds of new laws and rules and regulations and policies. And sitting in front of me is a senator that is turned around and in the middle of this legislative session is suing me.
The Senate adopted a rule in January 2005 which said that if a complaint was filed with the Senate Ethics Committee against the legislator, that complaint would be secret, confidential. And if the Senate Ethics Committee found that there was no substance to the complaint, then it would never be public. It would be held secret forever.
If I want to play those games, I file an ethics complaint against you, I can release it. Mr. Anderson in Rome, Georgia can release it, and by God, we know he will. So if it can be released by the person who gave it, who cares that the Ethics Commission isn't going to release it?
It's legislators standing in judgment of other legislators. There's some folk who want this to be a good old boy or good old girls club. I disagree.
While senators such as Don Balfour agree that Senate rule restricts Ethics Committee members from talking about complaints, he did not agree that the rule restricts the speech of private citizens, as the ACLU contends. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Today, the joint House and Senate Democratic Caucus announced official support of two House bills. The first is an ethics bill sponsored by Representative Mary Margaret Oliver. She says she wants to limit dinners between lobbyists and lawmakers to $50 and discontinue entertainment money altogether.
But the Republicans claim that they passed the most most sweeping ethics bill in the history of Georgia. Well, I didn't feel that was true. I think that the bill that was passed about 10 years ago that required reporting of entertainment was a critical first step for the public to understand the social life of the average member of the General Assembly. Now it's time to take the response that the public has to those daily reports of what I think is out-of-bounds entertainment and take action.
Representative Oliver filed that bill today. Representative Jeanette Jameson sponsors a bill that would raise the service retirement allowance for teachers to 2.5%. The current cap is 2%.
We have got to offer an incentive that will keep our finest educational professionals in that field. And I was very serious when I introduced the bill. I realized that the fiscal note came back as astronomical, and thus some people thought that it was not a serious effort on my part.
Representative Jameson said that the actuary report was as high as $800 million, but she questioned the accuracy of that number.
The first order of business in the House this morning was passage of a measure designed to attract the NASCAR Hall of Fame to Atlanta. House Bill 1182 exempts construction materials used for the NASCAR site from sales tax. House Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter told his colleagues that the $5 million tax break would be offset by the revenue generated by 1 million visitors expected each year.
First bill on the calendar, going to ask you to start your engines. This bill is part of our Georgia's NASCAR bid to get the NASCAR Hall of Fame here to our state. Many of you, I'm sure, have read that it looks like Georgia is not only in the running, but it's possibly ours to lose. Let me just tell you real simple what the bill does. Just as we did with the aquarium and other projects, we are exempting the NASCAR Hall of Fame, should it come to Georgia, we be selected as a site, from state and local sales tax on the construction materials. The math is pretty simple. The estimated is going to cost the construction materials, not the overall project, but the construction materials are estimated to be somewhere around $65 million. 4 pennies of that is the state, which is $2.6 million. Equal amount for Fulton County and Atlanta sales tax that would be generated from the sale of the construction materials, another $2.6 million. So you have $5.2 million is the fiscal impact, 2.6 of which is the impact on the state if we were to get it.
Atlanta, Charlotte, and Daytona remain in the running as potential NASCAR Hall of Fame sites. The final decision is expected next month. House Bill 1182 passed 151-0 and moves to the Senate.
The House today agreed to provide an income tax credit for employers that provide retraining for displaced workers. An update to the 10-year-old Georgia BEST Act, House Bill 1157, is intended in part to assist Delta Airlines as the company struggles to overcome its financial woes. House Speaker Pro Tem Representative Mark Burkhalter explains.
Delta has, through this BEST Act, engaged in job retraining. We told businesses, go out and retrain individuals for certain positions, that jobs that otherwise would be shipped out of this state, and you'll get a credit of $500 towards the cost of training that particular employee. They have done that over a number of years. There is a life to those credits. There's two problems. There's a life to the credit of 10 years,
and they can only take those credits if they offset it from corporate income tax. As you know, Delta, as well as all the airline industry, since 9/11, an event that was out of their control, have been suffering, and many of which have not turned a profit since then, including Delta. This bill proposes to allow them to offset those credits, not off of corporate income tax, but off of their withholding tax.
While Representative Burkhalter said he was unaware of specific Delta plans to retrain workers, he said the measure applies to companies throughout the state. House Bill 1157 passed 167-0. It heads to the Senate.
The House today voted to update the state's concealed weapon licensing requirements. House Bill 1032 is endorsed by the National Rifle Association, the FBI and GBI, as well as Georgians for Gun Safety and the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Bill sponsor, Representative John Lunsford, explained why the measure is receiving such broad support.
Georgia currently has a concealed weapons permit that has fell out of specifications with the federal government. Currently in Georgia, you could be convicted of domestic violence and be a criminal and still carry a concealed weapon in Georgia but not be qualified to purchase a new firearm. This bill simply brings us back into the federal statute and states that if you're not qualified to buy a firearm, you're also not qualified to carry a firearm. This also addresses the issues of domestic violence and also addresses the issues of someone illegally within our country purchasing or carrying a firearm in our state.
House Bill 1032 passed 165-1 and goes to the Senate.
Well, for those of you with access to the Internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on here at the Georgia General Assembly.
And we'd like to recommend a website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website is a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
Cellular service providers say that a Senate bill would restrict providers from requiring long-term contracts that would hinder competition. The Senate Technology Committee has now sent Senate Bill 395 back for a subcommittee for further review. Lawmakers J.R. Charles is live at the Capitol with this report. J.R.
Thank you, Nwandi. Bill sponsor Senator Cecil Staton called this bill a child of consumer concern. It would prevent cell phone providers from extending a customer's contract when they update their plans. But the wireless companies say this bill would only restrict a booming industry. If a customer walks into this singular store and wants to update their service plan, they'll have to agree to a 2-year contract, even if they just committed to one only a few months beforehand. Senator Cecil Staton wants to eliminate this policy. He says it's unfair to lock customers into a long-term contract.
This is a telephone, not a car, and 2 years is an awfully long time.
Representatives from the wireless industry said customers know what they want, and any regulation would prevent them from effectively competing and maintaining a profit.
We feel that ultimately this will inhibit us from both a carrier and a consumer standpoint to really offer the flexibility and the choice that you see in the marketplace today.
But Senator Staton says this is more about customer quality. Last year, the Georgia Better Business Bureau registered roughly 21,000 complaints about the wireless industry. And he thinks his legislation will cut down those numbers and improve competition.
I actually think, frankly, that the cell phone company that jumps on this and says that they are going to be sensitive to consumer needs and are going to disclose the options and are going to offer more options probably will come out ahead in the long run.
Now, again, the committee decided to send that bill back down to the subcommittee. They say some portions of the bill may restrict any special promotions that wireless providers offer to the new customers. Also, the Technology Committee approved 2 bills that would protect cell phone records from information brokers. The Senate Rules Committee will take them up in the next few days. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm J.R. Charles.
Senator Judson Hill held a press conference today after the passage of Senate Resolution 764. Senator Hill says that the resolution supports President Bush in his efforts to promote a peaceful coexistence between Israel and Palestine and his proposal to end U.S. aid to the Palestinian government.
We join President Bush in supporting the decision to suspend foreign aid assistance, taxpayer assistance to the Palestinian government, as well as any further aid to Palestine until they fully recognize Israel's God-given right to exist and end the violence that they've been been pledged to commit and have been committing for many, many years to come, including obviously not only Israeli citizens and the fine people of Israel, but also American citizens as well through the years.
That resolution passed the Senate this morning unanimously.
The Senate Health and Human Services Committee was unable to vote on Senate Bill 123 today. That's a bill that would prevent Georgia pharmacists from filling prescriptions that may induce abortions. There were not enough members present to have a quorum. The bill's sponsor, Senator Jim Whitehead, had this to say regarding the bill.
We're having a lot of occurring incidents where pharmacists, because of moral convictions, have decided that they do not want to fill certain chemical abortion pills and have been fired in the past. You have quite a few incidences before you. And so what this does is it helps those pharmacists who are not able to buy their own pharmacists.
Again, for lack of a quorum, the bill remains in committee.
Governor Perdue's constitutional amendment to change specific powers of eminent domain was discussed in last night's House Judiciary Committee. The governor's House Floor Leader, Rich Golick, who sponsors House Resolution 1306 and House Bill 1313, explained why the changes are needed.
What we're doing here today and what we'll be doing for the next 2 months on the eminent domain issue is not about now. It's about generations from now and making sure that, that we have the protections necessary in order to protect the integrity of our private property system, because that essentially is what our country is all about. I know we've all studied the Fifth Amendment in this room, and it's the reason why people risk their lives every day to get here, is for that promise of private property, that their home really is their castle. And by striking out that language, we do away with even that possibility that government could take private property and give it to some other private interests.
House Bill 1313 defines the term blight and other details of the power of eminent domain. However, the constitutional amendment in House Resolution 1306 must receive a 2/3 majority vote before the effects of either bill could occur.
On February 9th, we reported on Lawmakers that Georgia's electronic voting machines are not capable of printing a paper receipt for each voter. The Secretary of State's office, which administers Georgia's voting system, maintains the machines are not prepared to print such receipts, but one group of citizens activists disagree.
If the Secretary of State's office would allow the machines to be reprogrammed to activate the printer that is already in every single voting machine that we've purchased, yes. The problem seems to be that there's no political will to reprogram the machines.
Kara Senkul from the Secretary of State's office says the current system is not capable of printing receipts for voters, and perhaps more importantly, this is not a certified system for voter-verifiable paper receipts. The receipts that defenders of democracy are proposing would not allow for voided ballots. If you wanted to void a ballot and begin over, you would simply have a second or third receipt printed from a single voter, and these audit trails would never agree or create an accurate count.
The substitute to House Bill 1031 came before the House Judiciary Committee on Civil this afternoon and received a due pass as amended. Bill sponsor, Representative Ron Dodson, explains the bill.
The bill that makes it gender neutral for incest. And it was brought to me by the Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia. I'm sure we're all familiar that they work with the law enforcement, the DA, DFACS, in examining adolescents, children after a sexual problem. So what we wanted to do is get this law where it really covered everybody.
The committee added 4 amendments to the bill to make grammatical changes. The substitute to House Bill 1031 as amended received a due pass from the committee and now goes to House Rules.
The House today voted to make the Southern Appalachian brook trout the state cold water game fish. Bill sponsor Representative Bobby Reese explained that House Bill 1211 will increase awareness about protecting the only trout native to the South and how this fish can serve as an environmental yardstick.
The fish is actually a very good monitor of clean water. It's kind of like, I use the analogy of the canary in the mine, and some of y'all are probably tired of hearing that. But actually, the brook trout, if it's alive and thriving, that means our water quality is good. If it's not, then, well, you know what's going on there.
House Bill 1211 passed with one dissenting vote. Dare I say, it swims over to perhaps spawn in the Senate.
From fish to fowl, the House also agreed today to establish the Georgia Quail Trail and the Quail Advisory Council to provide information about the location of these birds around the state. The vote almost came without mention of Vice President Dick Cheney's weekend quail hunting accident, during which he accidentally shot fellow hunter Harry Whittington. But Representative Robert Ray couldn't let this one get away.
Is any protection in this bill to take care of politicians out there shooting at each other?
I think it would be up to each and every one of us to decide who they wanted to go hunting with. There's some people in this body that I don't think I would do that with.
House Resolution 1226 passed without dissent. It now moves to the Senate.
Well, the sound of blues and jazz echoed in the Capitol Rotunda today as the Spalding High School Jazz Band performed for lawmakers at the state capitol. Here's a sample of their performance.
And some fantastic sounds coming there from the Spalding Band. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, we'll have our weekly update with Tom Crawford, the national editor of CapitolImpact.com. We'll have that and all the latest from under the Gold Dome tomorrow night at 7. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Georgia Outdoors. That's coming up next here on GPV.
And I would make this comment that in the debate today in the Senate, actually there wasn't much of a debate over the supplemental budgets. One of the few times only one dissenting vote, and the minority party, the Democrats in this case, had one amendment, and that actually passed, and that was the providing the funding for the Katie Beckett waiver. The Republicans amended that, but the Katie Beckett waiver folks are going to get their $3.6 million so people can continue on that program.
We're a bit of bipartisan good spirit there.
This final note, graveside services will be held tomorrow afternoon in Macon for Ruby L. Brown, mother of Senate Minority Leader Robert Brown. Mrs. Brown passed away yesterday. In lieu of flowers, the family is requesting donations to the Georgia Alzheimer's Association. We at Lawmakers would like to express our condolences to Mrs. Brown's family. And that is our broadcast for this, the 19th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.